Welcome to the Pitchwerks podcast. I'm Scott McTaggart. Over the last 20 years, I've been a sales rep, a marketer, a manager, an executive, a consultant, and an advisor. This show is designed to give you access to my list of contacts so that you can learn more about how to present your ideas at work and succeed in your career.
Startups and salespeople, marketers and managers from the Epicast Network in Pittsburgh. It's the Pitchwerks podcast.
And yeah, we got some new cool tools to put around it, and we have lots more data than we ever have.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's math.
Yeah.
How do we use that math to make a difference? And you know, I like what McKinsey says. McKinsey says what artificial intelligence allows us to do is bring the cost of a prediction way, way down.
Hey everybody, it's Scott. It's Wednesday, and it's a Pitchwerks podcast. Big show this week. Andy Hanna from Othot and a bunch of other startups that came before that has stopped in, and Andy is a wealth of knowledge. Really happy to have him in here. We're gonna get into some stuff. I'm not exactly sure where it's all gonna go. Before we do that, you know I've got to ask you to rate and review the show because it's kind of like my thing. Just jump into iTunes, let us know how you think we're doing. It helps other people find the show, and that's, just helps us to continue to grow, and that's really what we're after. Let's talk to Andy. Let's find out what's going on over at Othot and see if we can't glean some more insights from him. All right, seated directly across from me, Andy Hanna, co-founder of Othot, right here in Pittsburgh. Andy, how are you?
I'm doing great tonight. How about you, Scott?
I am very intrigued at how much we're going to be able to fit into everything tonight, because you've been at this for a while. You've been startupping for a while.
Yeah, I guess it's been about maybe 25 years.
Which is, there's a lot that we can talk about, and I'm gonna just sort of helicopter over everything that I thought about, before we actually sat down. I was like, oh man, maybe I should ask Andy about like how things were before there was this structured approach to like building a scene, right? I was like, no. Andy started off, he said, because you and I ran into each other over at the Founder Institute event, and you had said like, oh no, I was actually a CFO and the finance end, and I was like, oh, you know what, we haven't talked really enough about the finance end. Mm-hmm. And then you started telling me about what Othot is actually doing, which is an AI play, and frankly like a real pain being addressed. And I said, oh, now we're talking like the big dirty end of the pool conversation. So here's what I've decided: we're going to tell them who you are, and then we're going to figure out what happens after that, kind of on the fly. Is that cool?
Let's go.
All right, let's start with where we are right now. Othot, tell me about how this thing got started.
Okay, so about 5 years ago, my co-founders and I, John Batico and a guy named Jeremy Garvey, were sitting around saying, you know what, let's start a company together. Literally, right. That's what we wanted to do, something together. We've been friends for a long time. John's a serial entrepreneur. We said, okay, what do we like best about what we were doing with our careers? And what we came down to was three things. One is data, one is analytics, and one is cloud-based software.
Like right out of the gate, here we are with something that's different than most people's experience. You didn't start and say, hey guys, I saw a problem, let's solve. You were like, look, we're already used to doing this. We're all pretty well like read into the setup. Let's figure out what our next thing should be because I'm getting bored.
Right. We're getting bored, but we also know what we like.
Yeah.
And we know how to do it. We know how well we can do it. And we said, but we want to do it different than everybody else.
But for you, it's a good mixture, right? For you, that's a good approach. For the average person on the street, it's interesting that you're at that level now where you're just kind of sitting around going like, well, what did we like? Like, what do we want to cook next? It's almost like opening a restaurant. It's like you've cooked everything.
Well, the interesting thing is when we started with a lot of interns.
Yeah.
We literally pulled a bunch of students out of Pitt and we said, okay, we got this idea. We can apply artificial intelligence, machine learning to anything. What do we apply it to?
What should it be?
And how do we do it?
I assume they're from that program, like the computer science program?
No, they're from the business program.
Really?
Oh, yeah. We're developed over the past 5 years, we've developed an advanced analytics program for the undergraduate business program.
Yeah.
And it's those students who are going through that program that we wanted to bring out and say, okay, let's think about problems. How do we solve problems with data science? And the very first problem that we tried to solve was how many people are going to walk through the doors at the Carnegie Science Center. And that was, we wanted to see if we could predict that.
Yeah.
And we were able to predict that.
That's interesting.
And what's that solve? We proved that we could do it, but what problems are we solving?
That's honestly why I kind of expected it was going to come out of the computer science group. And I'll tell you why. Because a lot of times there's someone sitting there going like, well, if you guys would just listen to me for 5 minutes, I'd tell you what's possible, right? Like there's always that person who's like, yeah, you guys always keep coming back to like this like 20% thing instead of the thing I'm interested in.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times on the business side, we're used to the dreams being too big. Like they just go, because they can't write the code and they don't necessarily know sort of what's possible and what the whole toolbox looks like. They say, you know what I'd really like? I'd like to know what tomorrow's lottery numbers are going to be. And everyone says, well, there's a problem with that. Dream a little smaller.
Well, no, actually, that was one of the questions that we started with.
Yeah.
So my co-founder, John, he would always say that. It's like, do you care whether I give you this big algorithm that gives you the daily number tomorrow, or can I give you a crumpled up piece of paper and give you the daily number tomorrow? It doesn't matter. You just want the answer.
Right.
So, and then from that,
I love the fact that we're actually rehashing a conversation.
it's true. And we said, you know what? It starts with the question, not the data. And I think that was a big epiphany that we had.
Yeah.
It was, lots of people say, I got all this data. Let's put some algorithms on top of it. Let's see what comes out. Our approach was, no, what's the question that matters? And then let's put the data science behind it and then feed it with the data. So the engine is fed with the fuel, which is the data.
Yeah.
That answers the question that's going to change your business.
You know what I do love about all this, though, is that you did pick your team first. And I love knowing exactly what to expect from my team. It is, as I get older, I realize how important that is. Back 20 years ago, I didn't understand the value of my coworkers to the extent that I do today.
Yeah. And I think, again, this being in this business for 25 years, what we really wanted to do was create an environment where really bright people could come that have intellectual curiosity, that were good people that wanted to solve problems.
Yeah.
That was literally what we asked people when we interviewed them. We said, we measured them against that. Is that the type of person you are? And we try to hold true to that. And when you build a group of people around that, you feel like you can do anything.
So fast forward now, you are doing something very specific for the higher education market.
Yeah. So we wanted to focus on a vertical that where really AI hadn't been applied yet. And yeah, of course, there's been machine learning and different algorithms that everybody uses. I mean, you can find it anywhere, but institutionalized, no. And we looked at a bunch of different verticals, and the one that popped up that we really liked was higher education. And here's why, because it has a dual purpose. One is that, our focus is how do we optimize a relationship between the individual and the institution?
Right.
From the time that we meet that individual when they're a high school student to the time that they enter college, that they graduate, that they get a great job that they wanted to have until they're engaged as an alumni. Data and analytics should inform us about that entire journey.
Right.
And if we can get to that answer, if we can understand that journey, we can optimize that relationship.
I was telling one of my clients about what you're working on. Just conceptually, it's cool, right? Think about how much front-end investment goes into, and I've got a 17-year-old at home. Like, we're talking about colleges right now, right? Think about how much front-end investment goes into bringing a student into a university environment. Mm. Like, you've got the admissions people, you've got the marketing people, you've just got an onboarding effort that is gargantuan.
Financial aid.
Merit exactly.
Scholarships.
You can actually, let's crass it up for a second. I'm pretty good for this. So if an admissions person is a salesperson, they can do everything right. And still, because you can't get financial aid for that student, the effort is wasted, right? So you closed it, quote unquote. You closed that kid. Man, you really shoved that bachelor's degree on it. Anyway, sorry, it's getting weird. And then you find out that you can't make it affordable for the family or for the student, or they can't get a loan to cover how much is not covered by grants and whatnot. And it's like, okay, well, we just kind of accept that. We just sort of shrug and go like, well. And when I started talking about that, I wasted effort. Now, all of a sudden, it's analogous to other businesses, and people start thinking about, AI is good to help you avoid wasted effort.
Right. It actually helps you find the best fit students that are going to be successful at the institution and beyond. And really that's what it's about. It's about the individual. How much can we learn about the individual and whether or not they fit at the institution and can thrive there? And, technology allows us to do that, understand at that level.
Now, you started like actually taking some level of product to the institutions how long ago?
3 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And when you started bringing customers on, I can't imagine that they already knew some of these words we're now using, as like, you didn't feel the need to explain any of the terms to me, right? Like I didn't feel like I had to tell you, don't worry, I'm AI savvy, right? So there's been some sort of evolution of our common understanding. 3 years ago, what was it like trying to talk to a chancellor or a dean that was in charge of this?
Yeah, I think challenging, but we right from the start didn't use the words.
Good for you.
So you can't. You use
that's 25 years of experience right there.
you use words like likely. So how do you know how likely it is for a student to enroll? You're not saying probability. I mean,
right.
Even that small change is important, because when you start saying 60% probable, people go, okay, what does probability mean again? Is that, okay, I got it. Whereas when you're saying how likely is it high likelihood, middle, medium, low likelihood, people get it. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, we have good experience. We have, we've done this for 10 years. We know. It's like, well, maybe you do, maybe you don't. Mm-hmm. And that's what machine learning can look at 1,000 variables at once. A human can think about 3 or 4. So if you have 1,000 variables that's telling you a story about an individual, aren't you going to understand that individual at a different level? And so that's how we sort of work into the machine learning piece of it. It's about the data that you can understand about the individual that drives a likelihood.
There's something fascinating about the competing priorities of being the AI, like amazing high-speed, low-drag company, and being someone who actually receives checks and purchase orders, right? Like if you want to be in the news, you go around and you say, we're an amazing college level AI company. Mm-hmm. If you want actually to have customers, you say likely. Mm-hmm. And there's an interesting lesson there for people getting started. Like, do you want to be flashy or do you want to be paid?
Yeah, I think that's true. And it goes back to what we were saying before, where you said, well, we started the company, we weren't looking at a particular problem to solve or a pain. And yet, while that's true, I want to make sure that we get across the point that once we knew what we wanted to do, then we went out and looked for the pain.
I honestly like the fact that you have this sort of like known quantity, like this known stable of potential collaborators. I hope you appreciate that privilege for what it is. It's awesome. Like to be able to like look back and be like, nope, that person right there, that person there will always have my back. That person there will always deliver. They've never come to me with a sad story or bugged out and ghosted me when the pressure was on. That is chef kissing fingers stuff right there.
You're right. I should appreciate that more. I do. I mean, I take it a little bit for granted because that's the way we live our lives.
It's lovely from this perspective.
And so thank you. I appreciate it.
It's like the super friends getting together. It's cool stuff. So let's talk a little bit about that history, right? So where do you know these co-founders from?
So I was actually there when John was born.
Nah.
I swear.
How about that?
He lived 2 doors up the street from me.
That's insane.
And
that is in 1,000 years not what I would have guessed.
We grew up together. We went to the same college together. We were roommates. We were in the same fraternity.
Yeah.
And John was a nuclear physicist that worked for General Electric that decided that he wanted to go into software, and he taught himself how to do software. And then all of a sudden he was into software, and next thing you know, he's the CTO of an awesome startup company, not Othot. Before, he was with Hyperos, which was a very successful startup out of Pittsburgh here.
Nice.
And so when you know somebody for 52 years,
yeah,
that's pretty amazing. And my other co-founder I've known for 12 years. I've done a ton of deals with them.
Yeah.
Right. So, you start with a common understanding and sort of a comfort level, like you said. And you're able to put these relationships together in a way that progress the idea forward. And I think people love the sort of romance of starting a company, and it is romantic at the beginning.
Yeah, from a distance.
But right. But then, how do you make progress? How do you get your first customers? How do you hire people with no money, no customers?
Yeah.
How do you get them to trust you? You know what you do? You go back and you dig up your old students.
And I'm not telling you something, but I am throwing something out to the audience, right? I would say better than half of the challenges of the early ventures you'll have are internal. It's what do we have in contracts? What do we have in relationship capital, right? Like getting people to meet each other at commitment level, right? Like, agree on, like, do we talk on the weekend or do we not? Like, do we think it's okay to send emails at 1:30 or should you wait? 1:30 a.m. PM is fine.
Well, mine come at 4, so AM, not PM.
I'm a night owl. You can ask everybody I've ever worked with. They go, God, I got to turn my ringer off at night or else McTaggart's going to wake me up. But a disproportionate amount of the discomfort comes from, it's not just you. You can't do it alone, especially now. It's harder to do something all by yourself than ever now. Yeah. I mean, maybe 20 years ago, like I remember my kid brother would just like whip up some software and just like put it out there as like a shareware thing. And he's like, yeah, if I make a few bucks, great. If not, no big deal. It's shareware. It's the thing, man. Now you can't do that.
No, you can't, but it is incredibly inexpensive to start a company, especially if you want to start an apps company, right?
Right.
So, I mean, you can do it.
Yeah.
It's how far can you get? And I would submit, out of all the companies that I've seen failed, I've been involved with a lot of companies as an advisor, as an investor, et cetera, et cetera. And once you get to a certain point where you're able to start a business, they fail because the people don't get along. They fail because there's a fight amongst a board member and a
Catherine
management
Mott
team.
sat in that very chair and said, it's never the tech that goes bad.
No.
It's the people.
And it's rarely the idea. If you get far enough that you have a good idea, it's rarely the idea.
Yeah.
It's rarely the tech. It's that you can't work together.
You have been a fixture in the scene now for long enough that I have to believe you get unsolicited requests. Andy, would you ever consider advising my company, right? And notwithstanding the usual things like, you have your own things going on, you've got your family, you've got your own interests and whatnot. There are going to be some that you just object to for whatever reason. I don't like that business. I think it's dirty. I don't like that business. I don't understand it, whatever. How do you choose which ones to advise and not advise?
It's the same reason why people invest. They invest in people. The idea has to be there, no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
The technology doesn't necessarily have to be there yet. You can have the plan to do that, but you have to have sort of a vision about what you want, but it's the passion behind it. Because, I often tell people the reason why somebody's going to write you a check is because they believe that you're going to get a check from somebody else.
Yeah.
Right?
Literally the only reason.
Always, because they want to know that you're going to lay your life on the line, figuratively, and you're going to go out and not let this company fail.
Are you going to work as hard as I would if I were you? And honestly, it's an idealized version of me, so you're already 2 strikes down, right? Are you going to work as hard as I lie to myself to believe that I'm going to work if I'm you?
Yeah, and I think there has to be an element of sort of failure be damned, right? We always used to, when we look back, when we're fortunate enough to be involved in a successful company, we look back at times and say, whatever made us think that we would be able to be successful?
Yeah.
It's like, how did we make that leap? Why would we have thought that we could compete against this company or that company? It's like, if I went back there today, knowing what I know today, I would have never done it. Because you have to suspend disbelief.
I'll argue the counterpoint, though, right? In that you're also capable of more than you think you are, right? So I think those two things may balance each other out, right? Because if relationships are as integral to doing business as we seem to agree that they are, right? You will find someone who says, I don't care about anything else. Andy will never let me down, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's the rock that can hit Goliath in the head, right? Like, I'm not saying that necessarily you could become $1 billion, unicorn company, but you can at least carve out a niche for yourself with a big client that you might not believe in yourself about just because you're one of the rare people out there who does what they say they're going to do.
Right. No, I completely agree with that. I mean, I think that is an underrated, your statement right there is underrated. do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah.
Because people trust that. And trust is the foundation of being able to build a business.
It's literally the key to every enterprise sale I ever made was just, I was the guy who did what I said I was going to do.
Do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah.
And people come back to you all the time.
I'm not that smart. I swear to God. I was just the guy who would show up. And when it came time, they were like, well, we've never seen this fish before. What should we do? And they'd go, I don't know, call McTaggart. He wears glasses.
But I think I want to go back to what I was saying before. I don't think we were saying things that were not in sync with each other. But what I said was when you look backwards. So it's like if you watch a tape, you watch a tape of a game and you're playing in a game and you're, how in the world was I able to catch that ball on the top of my head like that? I just don't understand how, because it's like, but you knew in the moment you could do it.
Yes. Now, one of the conversations that has to come up, and it's literally like the reason that you and I finally met face to face was about the way those relationships figure into the finance question, right? Because you were there, you were talking to the prospective new members of the upcoming Founder Institute cohort, and you basically said, look, if what you need is investment, again, it comes back to relationship. It comes back to like, do you seem like somebody who's just going to like disappear tomorrow? Do you seem like somebody who understands the gravity of the question that you're asking? Those kinds of things. Feeling comfortable in your own skin in a situation like that does not come naturally to most people. No.
And I think, so it's about figuring out the game. So I think in the beginning, when you're first raising money, and, we were young. I mean, I was in my 20s. I mean, it's kind of sounds funny, but 29 at the time when I was raising my first round of financing, and I have no idea what I'm doing. I didn't even know what the difference between pre and post money. I swear, didn't even know what.
Nope. Why would you?
What is post money valuation? Yeah. It's like what is pre? It's like there's a valuation, right? And so I literally knew nothing. And so I remember the first couple meetings just sitting there thinking, what is this process? Why am I being treated the way I am by this particular potential investor versus this one sounds like, oh, they're very interested. And, 3 months later, the one who treated you poorly actually wanted to invest. And the other one that seemed like they were totally interested were what we call voyeurs, right? Entrepreneurial voyeurs. It's like they love to listen to the story, never write a check. And so, but you have to try.
It's cheaper than going to a movie.
And if you can't, you have to place yourself into, when you're first doing this, into a mindset where it's going to take 100 meetings to get a check. And that the first 20 I'm going to fail miserably, and I got to learn what resonates, what doesn't resonate, and you got to be happy. You got to be comfortable with that. If you're not comfortable with saying people aren't going to like what I'm saying, they're going to kick me out. They're going to say your idea sucks. Yeah, and they do, and in their own way. Sometimes straight to your face, and sometimes in sort of.
I prefer those.
Yeah,
but I come from a background in sales and marketing, right? I'm used to and prefer when the feedback is quick and allows me to go back and reiterate.
I agree as long as it's founded. So one of the problems, but you often get that. You get people who have money who think they know everything. And I think that becomes a struggle for people who are passionate about their business and don't have the opportunity to explain something, and somebody sees something and say, nah, not interested.
Don't you think, though, that's the difference between having the privilege of being active and having the privilege of being passive is what I should say, right? And having the need to be active, right? So when we are trying, whether I'm doing it on a sales end or you're doing it on a fundraising end, we're trying to get people to do something that didn't occur to them, right? What do? We sit there and we whip ourselves into fighting shape. We go, okay, why do I want to do this? Is this the best version of doing it? Why am I the right guy to do it? Is there somebody else who should do it for me that should represent our organization? What's the best way we can say it? How strong should we push this point or that point? The counterparty literally just has to pick up the phone.
That's true.
They're not qualified in the sales terminology, meaning like you don't know if it's a good fit until. Now, granted, sometimes they'll put something up on a website or whatever that says like, we invest in mobile, IoT, whatever.
Early stage.
A lot of times it's like some dude There's nothing more. It's just some dude. Right? So you need to take that into your expectations, and you need to adjust your own expectations, because you're the only person that you can really control in this equation. It's like my reaction is more important than theirs, because I can't affect theirs. I can only affect my own. So you say, okay, well then that means that I'm going to go to a bunch of people who frankly never should have gotten a pitch, and I'm fine with that. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think about it sort of like a rookie quarterback, right? So the first time that you're out on the field, it's hard. You can't read a defense. You're trying to make a pitch, you're trying to make a throw, and you just don't know what's going on around you. It takes you a while to get into that. And then by the time that you're in your third or fourth season, you can recognize things. And so that helps you move things along faster. But unless you get in the game, unless you go and you got to keep going back into battle, right? And not be afraid of people telling you no. And I mean, you're in sales. I mean, when you first start, I mean, you hear no more than anything. And it depends a lot on what stage you're talking about too. So in the earlier stages, when you're raising angel funding, they want a return, but they also are investing as, they're an interested investor. They want something more. They want either a relationship with you, or they believe in a technology and want to see it save the world, or. It's often not always about the actual return. You have to have that as a component, but it may be 1/3 of the entire story. As you work your way up and you look at more sophisticated angel groups and you start looking at venture capitalists, and then that's where it starts to get to be a real business, right? And that's when you have to show up with I'm doing it totally different than anybody else. It's a big problem. So many people have this problem. And if we can solve it, we're going to change the world, and we're going to make a ton of money. And you will make 100 times your money. Not quite 100, but you know what I mean.
Something. You will do better than the other things that I think you're looking at.
And it has to be, the passion's there, but it has to be unique, because just like you said earlier, you I think it was upstairs when you said it, but it is that, you hear the same thing, there are no original ideas.
Right.
It's how do you portray the idea that's going to change something important that also will generate money for your investors. And that's what they're looking for, right? That's what the big investors are looking for. What is unique about this particular use of this technology? Hey, look, AI is math. Right? Yeah. Math has been around for a long time, right?
You even said the word probability, and I tried not to take the bait, which is saying it's statistics in a new wrapper.
It is statistics in a new wrapper, and we got some new cool tools to put around it, and we have lots more data than we ever have.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's math.
Yeah.
How do we use that math to make a difference?
Yeah.
And I like what McKinsey says. McKinsey says what artificial intelligence allows us to do is bring the cost of a prediction way, way down. So when you think about the days when PCs were coming out onto the scene in the 80s, right? Yeah. The computing power was so great that it brought down the cost of calculations to virtually nothing.
Yeah.
Which meant you could do calculations that you could never do in your home. And that's what AI allows us to do. You can predict the future at a low cost.
Now, the next question that sort of follows on from that is timing figures in, right? So NASA 50 years ago knew they needed better prediction tools. They just didn't have the computing power. We had to sit and wait for the chip to shrink and for the number of calculations to go up and those kinds of things. And it's almost like double Dutch, right? You have to jump in at exactly the right moment. And if you don't, you get hit with a rope.
Right.
And hopefully not literally, but you can be ahead. You can be too early. You can be too hip for the room. You can walk in, you can ask them for money, and they don't see the problem even though you've studied it. Or you can be late. You could show up and say, like, okay, I came up with this solution. And they say, Andy, I got bad news for you, and it's that this other company doesn't do it the same way you do it. They actually are solving my problem with a workaround or with a completely different set of tools and disciplines and whatnot. Do you have any advice in terms of like understanding timing? I mean, that is the key, isn't it?
Well, there's two keys.
Yeah.
I'll tell you. The first one is absolutely timing. And let me give you an example from the very first company that I joined, which was an early stage, which was Internet Securities. It was a Pittsburgh-based startup that eventually was, we moved to Boston. So we were in Boston. But that company had two trends at the right time. So the company mined data out of the former Soviet Union. And when you think we're talking about the 1990s, right?
Yeah.
These countries wanted to privatize their assets. They wanted to become free market economies.
Yeah.
You need two things for that to happen. You need liquidity, you need cash to flow, but you need transparency, you need data.
Yeah.
It didn't exist. But so what we did was we parachuted teams into these countries, and they mined data. They literally were photocopying pages out of a bank book.
Oh, that's cool.
And so we were digitizing it. So the need for that data was the first trend that we hit. And then one of the brilliant co-founders said, you know what? We don't need a dedicated terminal on people anybody who wanted to invest in those regions, they had a Bloomberg terminal, they had a Reuters terminal. It's like, you don't need a new terminal. We're going to put it up on the internet. But those two trends, timing, right? So back to timing. So we hit two trends at once: the ability to transport information over the internet for business purposes. And then the second one was that there was a dearth of information about emerging markets.
Yeah.
And when you can hit that timing right, man, it's just great. And so how do you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's like we knew 5 years ago that predictive analytics, you heard the words, but nobody was really applying it to a lot of different applications, especially in smaller businesses. But so we knew it was going to come, but we didn't know when.
This is the thing I know I'm terrible at, because I am never on the same page with like your broad market, right? Like the things that I'm checking out, sometimes I'm way late, but a lot of times I'm sitting around waiting for the thing that we've been promised, right? Mm-hmm. Graphene was a really hard thing for me. I wanted to invest in graphene companies for the longest time, and it's just like not coming. And eventually just like you climb the walls, because again, it's like, I don't know what the right timing is, and it's killing me that I don't.
It's like hoverboards. Where are my hoverboards?
Yeah.
But the second thing I would say, timing, but there's so much luck involved in success. And I don't think, I
agree with you. I just don't think
good fortune, luck, whatever it is.
I had no delusions that you could tell me how to be lucky, right?
You can't, right? But can you tell how do you deal with timing? But you know what, you can. I mean, it is true. The harder you work, the better person you are. I'm sorry, I believe in that.
I agree with you.
So luck will find you, and so you just got to keep at it. And that's where so if you can get those two things right, timing and luck, you'll be Google. New ideas are really difficult. So being able to execute on the ideas that are good in a new way, a unique way, is what gets you funded. Yeah,
I completely agree with you. I was hoping you were going to give me some sage advice on how to nail my timing problem, but I appreciate the other insights.
I can build an algorithm for you, probably.
It's not a terrible idea. Andy Hanna, Othot, thanks for coming in.
Pleasure, Scott. Thank you.
All right, that's the end of the ride. Thanks as always for tuning in. I will get back into the lab with Buzzy, make another episode of this fine program. We hope you subscribe. You'll get it first if you do. And thanks to Andy and everybody over at Othot. We'll catch you next week.
The Pitchwerks podcast comes to you from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a production of the Epicast Network and McTaggart, LLC. Engineering and production by Buzzy Torek and Nick Miller. For more information, show feedback, and ad sales, visit pitchwerks.com. pitchwerks.com. On social media, find and follow the show on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram using that same brand name, pitchwerks.